Hi everyone, my name is Artur. I am a digital nomad, and today I'd like to share with you my experience of being a digital nomad. I work for Square Technologies as an Android team leader, and yeah, looks like we can start. So, um, lost my focus. Here it is. Also, I am part of Android Academy, and we are creating different courses for newcomers in Android. And let's begin. So last 3 years, my wife and I were living a life of digital nomads. We visited different countries, we worked from several places, and today I'd like to share my experience with you. How does it look like when you live as a digital nomad, not because you have to, as maybe some of you do it right now, but because you want to. And the plan for today is that I'll tell you just a little bit of history. The main part will be about my personal experience. And just a little bit in the end, I'll talk about the teamwork and the difference that at least I've expected and I found in working remotely and in working in the office. So, a long, long time ago, and actually, that was in 1973 when Jack Niels created the first experiment that was funded by the government of the US about the telecommunications transportation trade off project, telecommuting. And his paper was about 200 pages. That's, by the way, 10 times bigger than my master thesis. So I guess he has done a pretty nice job. And basically, what he has found that nowadays, if you have a personal car, yes, you can go to your job, but you will probably stuck in traffic or something like this. If you prefer some public transport, especially now, probably you are a pretty brave person, not afraid of getting into different troubles. And when even you've got to the final destination, to the cubicle in an office, or even worse, in the open space, there are chances that we will not like what basically do you see and how does it feel. And his experiment shown that people who participated in this remote job, of course, in 1973, there was no like 100 megabit internet, fiber line, and all of this stuff. But instead, there were like small collocated kind of offices that instead of going to the main office, people could go there and work from there. And then again, special people moved their results of their work further. And they've got an increase in productivity, decreased the office costs, and staff turnover. And actually, I think that it was pretty much possible because let's look at this number 40 hours a week. What is 40 hours a week for you? I can guess that most likely you'll think, hey, that's my work week, right? However, I mean, when it is true, we can also think about it in a little bit different manner. Let's say that we are working 20 days a month, and 2 times a day we're going to the work and back from work, and every commute takes about an hour. Basically, that gives us 40 hours. And what does it mean? It means that in every month you are spending about a work week just to get to the office and back. And I mean, you work 4 weeks and 1 week you spend here. Instead, you could spend this time, I don't know, either to achieve even bigger goals at your job. Maybe you have some side projects. Maybe you want to spend this time with your friends and family, by the way. And losing this 1 week in a month, for me, feels like a burden, feels like something very big and very bad. And that's why I decided to go remote. And by the way, I'm not the only one who thinks like this. And it appeared that NASA was one of the first companies who promoted remote work, even before the coronavirus. I mean, like years before the coronavirus. And that's an interesting thing. Okay, let's say that you would like to begin. Of course, you can tell that I'm already working from home because I kind of have to. But let's say that this virus situation gets easier and there are not so many like problems why you have to sit at home. And your employer tells you that no, we want all the people work in the office. So you can think that, oh, probably to be able to work remotely, I need to be an entrepreneur or a freelancer, but I don't want to do the financing, marketing, and all the other stuff. But actually, especially if you have probably already had this experience that you can also work as a simple remote employee or a contractor. So basically almost nothing changed except of the fact that instead of working from office, you can work from home. And from home is kind of a broad meaning. For example, you can have a home office, and depending on you, yeah, that might be just a room in your house or an apartment if you're pretty lucky. Or I know people working from their kitchens, from their bedrooms. I mean, it depends. But the idea is that you can work from home. However, before the virus, I knew some people who liked to work from cafes or co-working. And to be honest, I'm not understanding why would they like to do it. Because one of the reasons why I like remote work is that I feel more productive when I don't get like always distracted, when there is no noise in the background, and so on. However, it appears that there are some people who work better in this chit chat environment and so on. And there are even special services. I have a link to one of them, Hipster Sound, who can bring this atmosphere of a cafe chatting right into your ears at your home. So that can happen as well. And there is so-called digital nomads. There are lots of different myths about it, and that's basically what I would like to touch today. And I'd like to share with you my personal experience, and I hope that basically that's why have you came here, because from my experience, I'll tell you what were the challenges or what were the hidden rocks that I met in my journey. And the thing is that I can say that I work as a remote employee and a digital nomad. And being a remote employee again means that I work for a company, I get my salary, I don't have to think about marketing and all of this stuff. And there is an asterisk because I work for the US company, and the junior, I work as a contractor. So I mean that I kind of have less rights and so on comparing to a proper, let's say, remote employee. But actually, I work and I mean, I feel like a remote employee, and that is a pretty common thing. That there is something, I mean, that you just use as a law thing, for example, that you are a contractor, and something that you are being really on. And when you start being a digital nomad, and when you start basically traveling in the same time as you work, of course, there is a preparation step. You should understand where would you like to go, what are the visas, where to buy some tickets and to buy some planes. And the thing is that, yeah, in theory, you can go to Brazil. From Brazil, you can go to Australia, from Australia to Canada, and then back to Europe. But I would tell you that this is not something that you will probably want to spend your time and money on. And usually it's better to understand that, oh, okay, this time I'd like to try working in South America. And you are selecting one country there and work in one country, then move to another, move to another. But I mean, anyway, you have at least some idea which parts would you like to visit and so on, because otherwise it may be unmanageable. And when you start planning everything, you can think that, oh, but I can find a place like everywhere in the world. Maybe it will be Asia, maybe it will be Cuba. And here is an interesting thing. As you will likely work with a team, you will likely need an internet, and some teams require having a video connection, some teams are okay with just like asynchronous messages. However, most likely you will need at least some internet connection. And once, my wife and I almost bought tickets to Cuba because they were costing like $100 or so. So it was very cheap and very interesting, and it was like 1 week in advance. But luckily, before clicking on this buy button, I decided to check out basically what happens with Cuba in Cuba with internet. And what do you think? It appeared it doesn't have, I mean, it's okay if a country doesn't have a fiber optics or maybe H3G connection is not so good there, or they like 5G. But the thing is that at that moment in Cuba, the internet connection was like in ideal cases up to 100 kilobit per second, and you have to wait in line to get this internet connection. So I think that my employer and my team wouldn't be very happy if I went to Cuba to work. And that's something that you should think about. Of course, when you're looking for a place, probably one of the first things that you will look for will be Airbnb. I've discussed it with many different digital nomads, and Airbnb works everywhere. Also, nowadays you can try finding something via Booking or via Agoda if you are going to the Asia. However, Airbnb is kind of the first place where you can look for a place. And an interesting thing here is that in different countries, people do different discounts for a monthly stay. For example, in Russia, it's common to have like 15 to 20% of a discount if instead of 1 day you are staying for a month. But in Chile, the average discount is 50%. And I mean, it definitely makes some difference for you. And there are some countries, like, for example, Thailand, where you can get just like rent a bike and look for the advertisements about, okay, I'm renting out an apartment or a house, and it can be cheaper. However, it will require some time. And I mean, at any case, you need to have at least some basement. Where do you come? So Airbnb, at least from my perspective, still looks like something to start on. And when you found a place and when you already staying it, you should definitely be ready to some issues. For example, here is a snake that was in our shower room. And when we told the host that, hey, we have a snake in our shower room, she told us, okay, I mean, let it live, it is harmful, and so on. But my wife wouldn't get into shower room with a snake. So we had to get a broomstick and bring it back to the wildlife. But I mean, that's something that you never know. That's something that you often wouldn't expect. And that's something that you should be expecting when you are going into some places that are pretty much different from the places where you usually live in. And another thing is, one of the things that I didn't like working in office in Russia is that usually you have some schedule. Maybe it's from 9 to 6, maybe it's from 10 to 7, and so on. However, it's like pretty strict. And if your team is distributed across the world, for example, we've started from Los Angeles, and at this moment I was in Thailand, so it was about 20-hour difference, then your schedule might shift a bit. How much a bit? Let's see. So we got up at 12 a.m., had a quick breakfast, and in half an hour we have already had our daily meeting and started working. Then we worked till 9:30. And at 9:30, we basically had our freedom, our free time, and we've got bed to 4 p.m. And it may sound crazy, and actually I can say that it feels crazy first first few days. However, when you get used to it, that was a really nice experience. First of all, I've met so many sunrises there that I haven't met within the whole of my previous life, I guess. Second, you see this time difference basically between 9:30 and 6 p.m. And 4 p.m. Basically, you have around 6 hours. And yes, you kind of have this 6 hour in your usual life, but how do they split up usually? So in the morning, you are getting up, you have some breakfast, you are preparing for your work, you are getting basically your commute time to job, then you work, again, you spend some time to get back, you have a dinner, and actually it's time to sleep almost. Maybe you have an hour or two to read something or again to spend this time with your family, but it's not much. And here, because you have these 6 hours kind of as a single block, you can do lots of things. For example, we visited different waterfalls, we've swam with sharks and so on. And this month that we lived with this schedule was actually feeling like vacation. Yeah, even if we have been working the whole time as a full-time basically employees, and we were able to finish all of our jobs, all of our job tasks. So that was an interesting experience. And again, one more thing is that as you work in a team, your processes can change, and our processes has changed, and we've got new schedule because of this. And I mean, we are part of the team. There are like tens of people except of us. And of course, we are trying to have something that is convenient for everyone. But I mean, there are some things that you should, come up with and so on. And when we moved a few hours to like a different time zone and our process has changed a bit, we started to practice work schedule like this when we got up at 4 a.m. and got to bed at 8 p.m. And we had the free time basically in the morning and in the day. So again, when all the normal people spend all their days working and they have only evenings to have some rest and to do something interesting. We had basically the most interesting time, like morning and daylight, to be able to enjoy the life and enjoy the nature, and it was really nice. And it was basically simpler because going back to bed at 8 p.m. is much simpler than at 4 p.m. because at 4 p.m. you still have like some sunshine and so on, and it's sometimes harder to get sleep, definitely. And it may feel that this remote life and digital nomad life is an endless travel. It is partially true, I would say. However, let's think about it. For example, this visa, different visa status is kind of a gray area for most countries. Yes, there is Estonia, there is Spain that have digital nomad visas, but sometimes you will have only limited time in one country that you can spend without like thinking about visas and all of this stuff. And for example, when we go in Asia, usually we've spent 1 month in one country. And what does it mean? It means that, for example, on Saturday, we are going from Moscow to, let's say, Thailand. Ideally, we are getting to Thailand on Saturday, but often we get there only on Sunday, just because the flight is pretty long one. Okay, so basically, first weekend, we are just getting to some place. And then we need to find a grocery store, and basically the weekend ends. So we start our work week. As I've told you, we have some additional time to go around, but not so far actually. And after a work week, when you basically work and you can enjoy and do something nearby, you have a weekend. Yeah, and that's the first weekend when you can basically do something fun and do something interesting. Then you have a work week, then you have second weekend. Then you have a work week, and I would tell that you have the third weekend, but actually on this third weekend, the like whole month is finished because we have like weekend 0 when we arrived, and we need to move somewhere else. And because of this, it kind of feels that in a month of a digital nomad life, you do actually have a time, something like a week of a proper vacation when you don't have to work and you can just travel. And moreover, if you have this week of vacation, then you can stop first in one place, then in another, then in third one, and so on, because you're not bound to one place. And as I've told you before, with Airbnb and I mean with this remote life, you will not probably like to move everywhere like every day or so. And you will likely see kind of smaller amount of different things around, just because you don't have this flexibility to go from one place to another. That is a downside. But again, from the other side, this is a photo of Machu Picchu in Peru. I'm again a citizen of Russia. And I don't think that I would get to Machu Picchu, at least like easily, just because it is a lot of travel, it costs a lot, it takes a lot of time, and so on. However, when we've already got to Argentina and then Chile, it appears that from Chile to Peru, it is like just a night bus. We've taken it and we got our vacation there. And we've asked for 1 week vacation. So within 1 week, we visited and saw a lot of different stuff. And otherwise, if I've taken like just 1 week vacation in Russia, I would spend half of it just like getting to Peru and back. So from this point of view, yeah, digital nomad is definitely a way to travel. But again, if you are looking for traveling, maybe you should better take a pause on like 2-3 months and just like travel without work at all. So that's something to be aware of. Another thing that, another myth that often comes is that, oh, okay, these digital nomads, these remote workers, they just lay on the beach and drink a coconut cocktail and just like have fun. Again, that is partially true, but I mean, you can do it in your free time, definitely. But probably you shouldn't try it doing it in the same time as you try to work. Because, I mean, I'm a programmer, I need a laptop, I need to work on a laptop. So if you've tried to open your laptop somewhere like outside, you probably know that there will be a lot of sun, you will likely not see anything, and so on. Even if for some case you found the shade and it is like barely visible, you'll get another problem, heat. Because, I mean, nobody gets to the beach just because it's the beach. Usually people like the weather, warmness, and all this stuff. But when it is nice for a person, it's not so good for your laptop. because it will try to become a helicopter. It will turn on all the fans. The battery will die, and I mean the battery. It's actually dying. We've bought a laptop, Dell XPS, a pretty nice one, and within one season, basically, its battery time decreased from 4 hours to 20 minutes. Uh-oh. And moreover, you probably need a socket. And even if there were some experiments, how can you get an electricity straight from the ground? Unfortunately, it's not yet production ready. And that means that if you would like to sit on a beach and connect your laptop to the network, to the AC network, probably you will not be able to do that. Okay. And about cocktails, we can tell about cost of living. And yes, of course, there are different countries, both in Europe and outside of it. There are many places that actually cost less comparing to, for example, prices in Europe. However, there are a few things to note. First of all, there is long-term rent and short-term rent. And with digital nomading, most likely you will be closer to the short term. And even if an apartment somewhere like in Asia, for example, usually cheaper than in Europe, when you try to do it for a shorter time, it becomes more expensive, again, depending on what do you expect, and so on. And one of the things here is that actually, in addition to understanding what is the approximate cost of living, you should be also looking at what are the currency, things. For example, here on this photo, you can notice the birds in the top right corner, right? And these birds, they are not part of the banknotes themselves. But it appears that in Peru, there are lots of different false money, not real money. And if you are exchanging your money just like at some corner, you have a pretty high chance of getting non-real money and just like losing basically your dollars or your euros and so on. And that's something that you should better know before coming to the country, that you should look for like special exchanges with like special things. They mark their money like as, okay, this is real money and I'm kind of signing it and so on. Or in Bali, in Indonesia, for example, the biggest banknote that you can get is about 5 euros. Again, 5 euros. In Europe, you have like 5, 10, 20, 100, 50, I guess. And there is like something, some cents, and up to 5 euro. That means that when you want to pay like rent for a month, you are using hundreds and hundreds of this paper money, because you don't have any other options. The PayPass or like banking cards are not so well used there. So you need cash, and this cash, again, it is like hundreds and hundreds of banknotes. And one time we were cheated in a small, again, exchange place, and we've got like 200 euros at that exchange place. We kind of lost it in a moment that a like exchange person did something like this, 1, 2, 3, and it was like a focus. And then when we tried to pay for the hotel, we found that we lacked 200 euros. That particular case was ended for us like successfully. I went to the police office. Police office came with me like with these very big guys, and I've got my money back. But ideally, I would prefer not to have that experience at all and just like be a little bit more aware. And that's something that you can always find on different forums. And all of this gets an interesting question of productivity, because you have to spend some time in additional things, and because you don't have your useful, comfortable chair around and all of this stuff. And there is a question is how, can you still work productive? And for me in particular, the answer is yes. But I know that some people feel like to work remotely more complicated. And I think that this coronavirus situation basically helped many people to understand if they can work more or less productively. But for me, as I've told you before, in the company when I worked, at that time, we had a meeting, 3 or 4 months and working in one place. And when we were working in one place, my productivity decreased just because, again, there is a project manager that wants something from me. There is a designer that asks that, oh, okay, how should we do it here or that way, and so on. And there are lots of distractions. And when I just like work by myself, I'm able to concentrate better and to produce basically more value to the company. So that's something I would say personal, and it depends. And another question that we are often asked is, what's about family and children? And in our case, my wife and I don't have children yet, so of course it is like simpler for us to travel. However, there is a different experience, and I know many people who travel with kids. And on one of conferences, I met a guy called his name is Doug Sealers, and his wife living this life of a digital nomad with 4 kids, 2 dogs, 3 bikes, and 1 van. And to make the things even more funny, when they started, they had 3 kids and 1 dog. So things happen, and if you really like it, if you really enjoy it, nothing can stop you. You can find him in Twitter, and he posts interesting stuff. Okay, I'll start it again. And sometimes when you work with different people, and I mean, because you work remotely, there might be some curious cases. And let's see one of them. What will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children's schools soon. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change? I would be surprised if they do. And this final one near the door. North Korea, South Korea. So yeah, that's really funny to look at. And BBC News, there are some like hard times between countries, and everything is so serious. And the kids come up, and I mean, I had the same situation in my job when one of my colleagues, he has 2 kids, and they often went into the camera. And I mean, in our team, everything was okay, everyone smiled and so on. However, you should think about it. How would you behave in this situation? I mean, would it be comfortable for you? Would it be something like a problem for you? And depending on it, you may need to do, I don't know, like some precautions or something like this. But it looks like mostly people understand it, and I mean, it shouldn't be a big deal for you. And the last question is, what happens if you have some troubles when you are traveling? And for example, the thing is that, yeah, you will never know. We've started our trip in last year's November when everything was good. We've got our flights canceled because of the hurricane in Philippines, first of all, and our visa was ending. Then basically we've got to Philippines after some time and got into lockdown. And again, you'll never know what happens, and you should be able to kind of either predict it, either you should be ready to spend some additional time in the places that you may not like so much as your home or something like this. For example, April in Philippines is summertime. It means that the temperature is 40 degrees and so on. And I mean, I wouldn't prefer working from there like for 5 or 6 months. We were getting there just like for a month or so. But overall, it was a nice and interesting experience. But again, you should be ready that something can go wrong. And by the way, the view from our balcony was awesome. Okay, so let's finish the part with the personal experience and go a little bit about how does it feel to work in a distributed team. Our team is distributed between USA, Europe, and Russia. And basically, one of the important lessons that I've got in my remote work is that teamwork equals to communications. And that means that there are many issues that go wrong just because somebody hasn't heard something, or because there was one expectation and it wasn't properly basically sold to the other parties. And because of this, it's important to have different communication channels. There are emails for something very important and ideally not so often happening. There is conference when you can store your documentation about the product and so on. And if you need to chit chat about how a feature should look like or work like, for me, the simplest thing is just to have a Zoom call and to see each other. And by the way, here is one more thing. I've discussed it with many different companies practicing remote work, and most of them tell that they have a policy of sitting with a camera, because otherwise it can often have a feeling that, oh, okay, these developers, they just like get requirements as an input and produce features as an output. And yeah, another input is salary from time to time. But I mean, if you see each other, if you talk not like with a voice only, or even especially not only in Slack or something like this, and you see each other, it kind of brings that team feeling. And that's nice, in my opinion. We've touched a note of personal efficiency a bit. And here I'd like to suggest you to look into different things. For example, there is a methodology, I would say, called Agile Results, that helps you to set your goals for a day, for a week, for a month, and I find it pretty easy and useful. There are such techniques as a Pomodoro technique or 52-17, where basically you are dividing your work into different pieces. And when you work, you turn off everything, all the notifications, so you don't get distracted. You work in a pretty productive manner sometime, then you have a break, then again you are turning off everything, and so on. And for me, it really helps to basically do my job done, do my things done in time, and not to spend time in different social networks or something like this. So that may help for you as well. I'll add the links in the end on a special slide. There are some special tools that help you to understand, okay, what is the different time in different time zones. And that, again, can help you to plan some meetings, to see what is the perfect time for a common meeting. And I mean, sometimes there is no perfect time at all, but at least you can find some trade-offs. And another important thing that you should think about is this information field. And what do I mean by it? When you work in an office, you have some coffee places. Again, you sit nearby, so you can discuss different things quickly and just do it. And that's fine. And the issue starts when there are lots of people who work in an office and there are only a few of them who work remotely. Because again, people just like discuss something in a chit chat, and then you understand that, okay, the feature that you are working on remotely is not needed anymore. And it was discussed somewhere, and everyone thought that everyone knows. However, they miss that you are offline, that you haven't heard it. And that might be inconvenient. So in this case, if you have a choice, it's better to have to work in a company that is like primarily remote, and otherwise you need to spend some time basically in order to bring this idea to your team that everything should be discussed in some like Slack or other means, so you can see it later and other people can see it later, and so on. And corporate culture, it might be different, and it depends again on the team itself and so on. The corporate culture of American startup was pretty much different from the one that I've had in Russia. However, again, probably working in Europe, especially working in Berlin or some other city with a pretty diverse culture, you've got already it. But some interesting things happen when you meet with the team. And I mean, you may probably haven't thought about it at all. However, in Russia, we have many different strong IT companies, and when you work in Russia, most likely you will work with Russians. And I mean, it's not bad by itself; it's pretty nice and so on. However, in Russia, we don't get that multinational company. We can not feel all these cultural differences. And I mean, it's interesting, and you can always learn something from other people. And if you work in a city when again, this cultural difference is not so diverse and so on, then remote work might be also something interesting for you. There are some questions about work-life balance, and in my opinion, it actually doesn't really make a big difference if you work in an office or if you work remotely. For example, I tend to work maybe more than I should have, and I mean by working, I mean not only doing my overall job, but also preparing presentations like this, talking on conferences, preparing workshops, or working on my personal side projects. However, I've done the same thing when I was working in an office. So at least for me, nothing actually changed. Yeah, sometimes I overwork, sometimes I work okay and well, but that's not something that depends on remote and not remote work. But the thing that depends is that when you work remotely, you should be always available. And that means that, for example, here I've got to some conferences, I was preparing my talk, and I've got a call from India from my colleague because the backend started to crash and basically give some 500 errors. And I mean, what option do you have? You just like answer. And this is something that you should be ready to. One almost last thing that I would like to tell about the cultural differences and all of this stuff, that if you are working for an American company, you can be fired like from today. And it doesn't actually, it's not because they're bad, it's not because you're a remote worker, but I mean, it's just how it works in the US. And you may have heard about the case when Zoom, when Bird, a pretty big, I would say, startup, laid off 400 people just like making them a Zoom call. And all of their laptops were blocked afterwards and they couldn't do anything. And if you are used to this Europe, like, okay, we have 1 to 3 months before an employer can lay us, then it's not like this in the US. So going back to conclusions. Do I need a remote job? The thing is that nobody can answer for you. There are some pros, there are some cons, and I've tried to share some of my experience that you don't usually find like on any random site about it. And in my opinion, it's definitely worth trying. And I mean, not only worth trying in terms that you already tried working in this coronavirus situation, but actually worth trying something more, something bigger. And I hope that this talk will gives you a little bit of boost. So that's it. Later you can find a few slides about where can you find a remote job and what are the options out there. There are some links that I brought that I find important. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. I'm open to answer your questions. Okay, let's see. Have you had any issues regarding taxes in the countries you visited and worked from? That's a pretty nice question. So as I've noted it a bit, overall, being like a digital nomad and working remotely is kind of a grayish area in most of the countries. Because yes, these countries tell you that, oh, okay, you can work while you are in this country. But the thing that is actually meant there, that they don't want you to work in that country because you will kind of take some of the workplaces out of that country. And when you are a digital nomad and you're working for another party, I mean another country or something like this, then it is like not so obvious. And there are special visas that allow you to stay in the country, and often they don't even ask you to pay the taxes. Maybe it's just like a one-time fee or something like this. However, it is like a complicated question about, for example, if I'm going onto some conference or if I'm going to some business meeting. Most often it is possible to do it just like with a usual visitor visa. And this is how we did it in most of the cases. And basically we were paying our taxes back to Russia. And yep, this is how we did it. We can chat with you later if you write me in talk. I have some additional information about it. Next one. What about medical insurance? What something happens to you during these travels? That's again a proper and valid question. And actually, we were using several times our medical insurance, just because it's pretty expensive to get into trouble when you are in Chile or when you're in Australia, for example. And most in the cases, we were using our travel insurances, right? So that's one more thing that you should plan and buy beforehand, because most of those insurances, they don't allow you to buy an insurance if you're already in your trip. So yeah, but I mean, they work, and they we were traveling for months and months and months, and our insurances were covering it. Thanks. Again, rare visas. Do you know if remote working is classed as a work within the destination country? Yeah, I think I've touched it a little bit. Again, it depends on from country to country, and it's always good to find a forum that is talking just about this particular country, and everything else you can basically add from the first question. Next one. Hello, how good of Android developer do you have to be to get a job as a nomad? How to get to that level? I mean, any Android developers wants to be like as strong as possible. And I know people, like from my experience, usually people had at least like 3 years of experience, professional experience, before being a digital nomad, just because communications are more complex and it's just kind of harder to work in this environment if you are just like a junior level developer. And most of the companies that are looking for remote employees, they are working for people who can just like start working and basically do the job right, and without any like additional questions and so on. And how to get to that level, in my appearance, like practice is everything. So as I told, in addition to my job, I often have some like side projects. Like pet projects, for example, a bot that works with different and events and so on. And in like this continuous development, you can be a better developer. But I mean, that doesn't basically, there is no difference if you are a remote employee or not. You can just work and work hard. Okay, next one. How are the interviews for that kind of jobs and how to prepare? My answer is they're the same. I mean, they're the same companies. For example, I am interested in startups when I can bring a lot of value, when my kind of T-shapedness helps me, instead of just like working on one direction and working in it. But I can't say that there is something different, because they will be, again, kind of the same people, kind of the same tasks, and it really depends on what are the kind of job that you are looking for. Next one. How often have you experienced a bad internet connection, even though the place... Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention it. Basically, the first thing that you do when you are getting to a new place, you are buying 2 or 3 SIM cards of different providers just to get some 3G or 4G connection, I mean, just in case. And that's true. And we've had it. And when you have an internet connection in an office, you are like, oh, okay, I've came to an office, so I have a check mark, everything is okay. However, if you have a bad internet connection and you work remotely, you are thinking, oh, probably my colleagues now think that I'm sitting on the beach and drinking my cocktail and doing nothing. And that is pretty uncomfortable thing, and you will probably like to avoid it. But I mean, that's happening. Where are you right now? Next question. Right now I'm in my homeland in Russia because we were pretty tired of being in the warmth and so on. And when we've got an evacuation flight, then we spent almost 5 days to get back from Russia, to Russia from the Philippines. And now I like this notion of like food delivery and a little bit coldness and so on. So right now we're in Moscow. What are the precautions you take with respect to coronavirus being a digital nomad? So basically, my precaution was that first of all, I was locked down for 5 months in Philippines, and as any person who was in Philippines, I just had to sit at home and do nothing. And now I'm basically following the same rules in Moscow. But I know some people, some of my friends, they are going to different places and they are in Europe now, again, Russian citizens, and they started from Turkey. So, I mean, you wear your mask, you wash your hands often, you try not to be in like public places a lot. So I think that's something usual. Next one. Isn't there a problem with language barriers, or isn't English enough to get by in any country? I had this slide in my previous presentation in Russian, and the thing is that in Russian, not everyone knows English as well. And basically, my point is that you don't have to know even English to be able to get by in any country. People, again, as a student, I remember playing different games when, I need to eat, I need to sleep, or something like this. And you can play this game with anyone in this world, and they will more or less understand you. And again, it's important to know English when you are working in English-speaking companies. So, you communicate with them. But I've learned some Spanish when we've been to South America. And it again appeared that in many countries in South America, people don't speak English. And my Spanish was like basic. However, it was fun, and people were like laughing when I tried to habla español un poco, and that was fun. So language shouldn't be a big barrier. Of course, it will be a little bit more complicated, but you will be able to do everything. Give me a menu, I want this, and they will understand you. No worries. Next one. Do you expect to be a digital nomad for most of your career? That's a good question. Probably at some moment I'd like to settle down, but for the nearest years, I'm expecting to continue this digital nomad life. Global communities for digital nomads. Yes, we have. And especially if you contact me, I can show you a few. In the list of the links that I've shown in presentation, there are, for example, Digital Nomad sites and nomadlist.com and so on. So yeah, there are definitely some places, and co-working spaces have like higher, like frequency or density of digital nomads as well. How do you deal with Scrum meetings in different time zones? That was one of the things that I've shared in my personal experience. Basically, if you remember that we had to work from 12 a.m. till 9 a.m., that's basically one of the way how do you deal with Scrum meetings. I mean, you communicated with the team, and if the team insists that you need to have those meetings, you have it, regardless of what's your time zone, or you find another company. That depends on you. And one more thing about the meetings is basically, I know that some teams do them asynchronously in Slack or something like this, but again, that's up to the process in your team. How to avoid the downsides of not meeting colleagues in person? Career opportunities usually arise from these networks. Right. Here are two things. First of all, as I've noted, most of the remote companies that I know, they bring people at least once or twice a year in one place, and often it's a nice place. For example, previously, we've got our meetings in Japan, in Bali, Indonesia, in Prague, by the way. That's a nice place as well. And we work together. So we were meeting in person and so on. Second is that if you are using video calls instead of usual calls, you bring at least some personality into these communications. And third one, about career opportunities, as I've told you, I prefer startups. And one of the things is that if you are working in a startup, then you have, again, higher career opportunities. Just because, for example, you started as 10 people, now you are 50. And I mean, as a person who was in the beginning of all of this thing, and I mean, if you work like great, and if you are passionate about it, if you have passion for it and so on, then you will have these career opportunities as well. And I mean, that's from my experience too. Can you share again the link to find a remote job? If you will scroll the talk, there are a few slides when I have a QR code to this presentation, and on that presentation you will be able to find all this remote job information. Do you think it makes sense to do less remote, more on-site work at the beginning of a new job to get to know people better? Yeah, and I mean, I know that some companies practice it, and especially, again, it's simpler in like before the coronavirus situation, and they can just like bring you for 2 weeks, for a month to work with them. Again, the advantage is that you will better know the colleagues and the management and so on. And I remember then when I first started working remotely, because we were in a startup, I basically talked with everyone, and the CEO was like, I don't know, like a king, and I didn't want to bother him at all, because I mean, I'm a developer, he is a CEO. But actually, after meeting with them and after working with them in one office, I understood that, oh, okay, I mean, he is kind of the same guy as me. He is a cool guy. He has some other experience and other responsibilities. But I mean, it was much more simple for me to communicate with him in the future before that meeting. How to deal with people that are jealous that you are working from great places? I mean, your coworkers. I mean, first of all, they have the opportunity to do the same. And if they can't, I mean, I haven't had such an issue. Let's say it like this. So don't know what to answer. Communication, I guess, the answer for everything. Next one, what about camping? What's your opinion on that? I know that some people do it. However, in my opinion, again, as I've told you before, when you live a life of a digital nomad, you don't actually have so much time for anything around your job. And camping is something that that requires a lot of energy and a lot of time for like satisfying the simple things like what to eat, where to sleep, and so on. And because of this, I don't like this experience, because camping itself will take most of my time. Have you done localization tests of one app in those various locations? Seems like a great opportunity. Yeah. That's an interesting thing, and basically that's why one of our retreat was in India, because our most part of our users at that moment was in India. And yeah, we just got different user tests, and we communicated with locals, and it was fun. So that's definitely a thing to look at. Did you try the van life while working out for holidays? No, I haven't. And again, sometimes I thought about who it would be interesting experience, but I've tried something like a van life once. And again, it is very time and energy consuming. And for me, it would be hard to make all my job done, basically. Thanks. And yep, I guess that's it. I was glad to see you all. Again, I am open to talk with you in Twitter or in Tolkien platform. Find me, Artur Badretdinov, at Squire. And by the way, we are hiring. Yeah, so if you are good at Android or iOS or basically any developer, you can join and contact me as well. And that might be a good place for your remote start. Thank you for your attention. Bye bye.